You look at old pictures of Kerrville before the pavement went down and before we really got electricity, and you get a feel for how rough it really was. I have an old picture of the courthouse where you see all the droppings and the ruts and the big stones in the middle of the road. And you look at Kerrville now and you don't even think about where we came from.
And this was a rail, this was a trail, this was where the folks that were moving wool and mohair and cattle, we were right on that trail.
When you stop and think about it, Kerrville was almost the last point going west. So the need for the general store here was incredible. You had to be able to buy supplies somewhere if you were going to keep going.
You went down to downtown Kerrville to buy everything. There were no malls. You bought everything from your pajamas to your business suit to the best Christmas present a kid could ever get.
A lot of people talk about how a lot of our history is gone because we didn't save the old buildings. Well, if you look at the old photos, a lot of those old buildings are not something you'd want to save anyway. They were clapboard with false fronts and small. As businesses grow and as our lives change, some of these smaller buildings weren't really practical for today's use. So I can understand losing some of that in the name of progress.
Even though some buildings have been lost to the machinations of history, many remain, and Kerrville is blessed to be able to enjoy the historic buildings in our downtown area. This video will explore the history and architecture of a handful of those special structures, including the Arcadia Theater, the Schreiner Mansion, the Schreiner Store, the Weston Building, Pampel's, and more.
And it is just so wonderful that we have these buildings still that we can enjoy today. It is a very special town, a very special place, and if the heartbeat of a city is their downtown, we have a great and healthy heartbeat here in Kerrville.
A city's downtown embodies the history, tradition, and culture of a place. Downtown Kerrville is rich in history, legend, and lore, even as it constantly evolves and changes to reflect who we are today.
The Arcadia Theater was a special gathering place for generations here in downtown Kerrville. It was built in the mid-1920s, and there was a contest to name the building. Had over 150 entries to figure out the name of the building, and it was selected as the Arcadia Theater. It was a gathering place, as I said, and when it opened, there was over 1,000 people that pushed their way in, so to speak, to the theater. It was originally a mission-style building, beautiful, and in the mid-1900s, the facade was changed, much like it is today. It also brought in the beautiful neon sign, the upright sign that we see today. The theater, as a movie theater, closed in the late 1980s, 1988 I believe it was. And it has been owned by different nonprofits and private enterprise, and it's currently under renovation, and so we have a lot to look forward to with the Arcadia. But the Arcadia Theater is an iconic building in our downtown area.
The Schreiner Mansion was built in 1879, I believe, was the first phase of it. The captain had lived in his store until he decided he needed to have his family in town and be close to his businesses. So he hired a prominent architect that was from England. His name is Alfred Giles, and he came up and designed the Schreiner Mansion. They built it in 3 phases. The first phase was parlor, kitchen, and the dining area. And then they expanded that to the size it is now, except for the front porches, I believe, were the last addition, with the addition of the porches and the columns. The carvings on the outside of the building were done by German stonemasons that they imported, I believe, or brought over from Germany to do that. In 1927, after the death of Captain Schreiner, the masons needed a larger space than they were in. So they came to the Schreiner Mansion and used upstairs for their meeting space. And that's when the interior walls were taken out, and we do not have the original plans to the house. So we have no way of knowing the exact configurations. The first floor of the house was the public library in 1941, and upstairs was used as the meeting space for the Masons. The mansion has changed ownership through the years, but the Shriners are the only family that actually live there. Now, under the care of the Cailloux Foundation, it is a historical home, and we have guided tours twice a week through the home, and also it's an event center. More we are at the mansion as docents and give the tours, the more we get involved in the day-to-day, in what it would have been like to live there, and you start looking for the transoms and try to figure out how they stayed warm and how they stayed cold and or cool in the summertime. It's just an incredible building. And the workmanship is wonderful. The wood, the trim, everything is just marvelous. Just a beautiful place to be.
I would say the Favorite Saloon or the Weston building probably has one of the most colorful histories of all the buildings downtown. It's reportedly one of the oldest buildings downtown. And it's thought to be designed by Alfred Giles, who was an architect who designed the Schreiner Mansion and some other buildings downtown as well. It was a saloon with a really bad reputation. I remember my aunt, who's got me real interested in the history of downtown, told me that when she was a girl, and she was born in 1907, when she was a girl and a young woman, respectable people weren't seen anywhere near that building. They would actually cross the street to avoid being seen anywhere near it. That's how bad its reputation was. I know a Texas Ranger was shot there. There was a scene of several fights. It was also reported to have had a brothel upstairs. It's on the corner of Earl Garrett and Water Street. It's the current home of Francisco's Restaurant. It's a limestone building, and the main entrance faces actually out to the corner rather than on one side or the other. It was one of the most photographed buildings in Kerrville history because Tivy used to have their pep rallies right there at the corner of Earl Garrett and Water Street, and so it would show up in the background. It's right there across from where the swimming pool used to be. I believe Schreiner Bank was on that block. There's a metal plaque in the doorway that faces out to the corner, and it says Weston. And Weston is the name of one of the men that owned the building during its history, and it's just retained the name ever since. I think it was Weston and Schwedhelm that ran a saloon there as well. And Prohibition kind of called a screeching halt to all the fun that was in that building. So, I think out of all of the buildings downtown, It's got one of the more seedier histories, but it's also had some interesting businesses in there as well.
Pampel's is one of those buildings that everybody knows when you say Pampel's. You know exactly where you are in downtown Kerrville. Originally it was a one-story building, but in the early 1900s, John Pampel bought the building, and it was a two-story building, and it was the opera. Think about, Kerrville had to offer, with other movie theaters besides the Arcadia, and then an opera house in downtown, would seat 450 people up there. And the building is not just what you see from Water Street. It's a huge building. Beyond the opera and the performing arts, they had a skating rink that was way before my time in there. Behind the building, they had a Coca-Cola bottling company. They had a candy confectionery operation back there. It's a huge building. The beautiful wood floors are original as they are today. The beautiful stained glass and bar area have been photographed for magazines throughout the United States. It's just a lovely building. That building has been very good for retail. It was a great sandwich shop and antique store combination. It has been a wonderful restaurants throughout the years. It was restored to the way we know it now in the early 2000s. The building is a beautiful history of our evolving of Kerrville over the last 150 years.
I think after returning from the Civil War, the captain saw that the sheep industry, that business that he was in with his brother-in-law, Casper Rial, out on Turtle Creek, that once they grazed that lush grass down, it was difficult to grow it back right away. And he saw that he came to Kerrville, and I'm sure tried to figure out how he was going to make a living and take care of his family. I think he already had 2 children at the time. He came to town, saw the need for the mercantile, and partnered with comfort merchant August Faltine. In 1869, I believe, they opened Faltine Schreiner Mercantile. You know, as settlers began to move west, and as the trail drive started going up, they went straight up 83 to Dodge City, Kansas, and they saw the need for supplies needing to be in this area. So the captain started the mercantile store with his partner, and Faltine Schreiner Mercantile came into being and has been owned by the Schreiner family now till 2007, I think it was sold. As the trail drive started, the men that were going on the trail drives, if they did have any cash, they didn't want to have to carry that cash on them up the trail because it was so dangerous. There were still lots of Indians and outlaws in the area and all the way to Dodge City, but they would entrust their funds, whatever they were, to the captain, and he would hide them under the floorboards of his store and would roll a barrel of coffee or flour or whatever it happened to be over that. And that's how the banking business started. Faltine Schreiner Mercantile was a small store and would grow into one of the largest mercantiles and banking empires in the Southwest. In 1881, Captain Schreiner hired the architect again, Alfred Giles. He used him on 3 or 4 different projects to design and replace the original wooden building. And as his businesses grew and he got into the grocery business and the cash and carry grocery, which is people used to come in and leave their list and it'd be delivered to them. And then finally the captain had it to where they would come in with their list and pick the products themselves. And that was the cash and carry business, which was on Earl Garrett. When the captain built Schreiner Mansion, he didn't want to have to walk the street from the bank, through the store, out onto Earl Garrett to the mansion to go home at night. So rumor has it that there is a tunnel, and I haven't been down there, but I understand it was sealed off when the Masons went into the Schreiner Mansion in 1927 after the death of the captain. They sealed the tunnel off.
With what we're doing now with downtown and the surrounding areas of downtown, it's walkable. The next generations and the next generations are going to enjoy these buildings and these streets for many generations to come. Many.